So what exactly are we seeing when we type whos? We're seeing a lot of information about the variables that we have declared and that we're using in our current running instance of MATLAB. So under the first column, when we type whos, we'll see the name of the variable. That's the name that we gave the variable when we first created it. Now, as you'll have noticed from the MATLAB documentation, it's really important that you type the name exactly the same way every time you want to use it. MATLAB won't be smart enough to catch a misspelling, and it is case sensitive. So for example, this num would be different than a variable that was num with all capitals. The next column is the size. So far we've been using things that hold one value, but we'll see the size is listed as 1 by 1. That's because every variable in MATLAB, no matter how small, is actually stored as a matrix. And right now that doesn't make a lot of sense because we're just using these very small numbers. But in future classes we'll see how it's actually a huge advantage for us that MATLAB is very good at using matrices. The next column says bytes, and that tells us how much space each of those variables takes up in memory. That's the amount of space that's used to store the variable. And next week we're going to see a little bit about exactly how those variables are stored internally in the computer. The next column is the class, and this is an important column because this is the type of the variable. Right now we've just been making variables. We didn't even really know they had types, but it turns out that the type of the variable is very important. In programming, the type of the variable it influences a lot of things. It influences how much storage space it takes to store the variable, and more importantly, it also defines what operations are allowable on that variable. So the default variable type in MATLAB is double. And that just means that it's a double precision floating point number. We'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of what we can do with the variables and how we might use different types in different circumstances in later classes. But for now, it's just important to be aware of the fact that variables do have different types, and the type of a variable influences the kinds of operations you can do with that variable.